Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. When my mother passed away in a tragic car accident, I was just 16. She was the heart of our family, and without her, my father and I were left adrift. We clung to each other for comfort, trying to fill the void her absence left. For 2 years, it was just the two of us. Though our grief was raw, those years were some of the closest we'd ever been. Then Clara came into our lives. She was stunningly beautiful, with an effortless elegance that seemed to draw people in. My father was completely smitten, and while I wanted him to find happiness again, I couldn't shake the unease I felt around her. Clara wasn't unkind at first, but she wasn't particularly warm either. It felt like she was tolerating me rather than trying to build a connection. When they got married a year later, I tried to keep an open mind. I told myself Clara might grow into her role as a stepmother and that things would get better with time. But instead, things got worse. Clara made it clear early on that she had no interest in being a maternal figure. She rarely spoke to me unless it was to criticize. Her favorite target was my relationship with my father. "You're such a daddy's girl," she'd sneer. "Maybe it's time you grew up and learned to be independent." She also had a habit of comparing me to my mother, always in the most demeaning ways possible. "You're just like her," she'd say, her tone dripping with disdain. "She was a dreamer who never followed through, and it looks like you're heading down the same path." Her comments stung, but what hurt the most was how she erased my mother's presence from our home. Within months of moving in, she redecorated the house, removing every trace of my mom. The family photos, the flowers my mother had planted, the art she loved, all of it was gone. It felt like Clara was trying to erase her entirely, and my father, blinded by his love for Clara, let it happen. When I turned 18, Clara ramped up her efforts to push me out of the house. "Don't you think it's time you stand on your own 2 feet?" she'd say, always under the guise of advice. My father, trying to keep the peace, would tell me to ignore her. But his refusal to intervene made me feel like I was alone in the house I'd grown up in. By the time I left for college, my visits home were few and far between. Every time I returned, Clara made it clear I wasn't welcome. My childhood bedroom had been converted into her home office, and she treated me like an inconvenience whenever I came around. I tried to maintain a relationship with my father, but Clara was always a wedge between us. When my father fell ill earlier this year, I knew I couldn't stay distant. He was my dad, and I wanted to be there for him in his final months. But Clara made even that difficult. She'd sigh dramatically when I arrived, roll her eyes when I stayed too long, and even accused me of only visiting to secure my inheritance. "You're not fooling anyone," she said one evening, her voice dripping with venom. Still, I spent as much time with my father as I could. During one of our last conversations, he apologized for not standing up to Clara more. "You deserved better," he said. "I should have done more for you." My father's funeral was heartbreaking. The house, filled with mourners, felt suffocating. As people shared stories about my dad, I clung to their words, trying to focus on the good memories rather than the loss. Then Clara stood up. She clinked her glass loudly, silencing the room. With a self-satisfied smile, she announced, "I just want everyone to know that, as a gesture of goodwill, I've decided to let me stay in the house for 3 months. After that, she'll need to move out so I can figure out what to do with the property." Her words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. I couldn't believe the audacity to stand there at my father's wake and act as though she was doing me a favor. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, Mr. Bennett, my father's best friend and his lawyer, let out a loud, incredulous laugh. Clara's smile faltered. "What's so funny?" she demanded, her tone sharp. Mr. Bennett stood, his laughter subsiding into a knowing grin. "Oh, Clara," he said, shaking his head, "you're the one who'll need to find a new place to live. This house, and everything else your late husband owned, isn't yours to offer. It all belongs to me." What I didn't know was that before passing away, my father discovered Clara's infidelity. One night, too weak to sleep, he was sitting in the living room when he saw Clara sneaking into the neighbor's garden. She thought he was asleep, unaware that the dim light from the living room gave him a clear view of her and the neighbor laughing, leaning too close, and touching in ways that were far from innocent. My father, already weakened by his illness, chose not to confront her. Apparently, he didn't want to waste what little energy he had left on a fight he knew would devastate him. Instead, he turned to his best friend. Together, they devised a plan to protect my future. My father changed his will, leaving everything to me, and explicitly giving Clara just $1, a symbolic gesture to ensure she couldn't contest it. The room erupted into whispers after my father's lawyer spoke. Clara's face turned ashen. "That's impossible," she said, her voice trembling. "He wouldn't do that to me." Mr. Bennett pulled out a copy of the will and handed it to her. "Your husband discovered your affair with the neighbor," he said calmly. "He was heartbroken, but he wanted to ensure his legacy went to someone who truly cared about him. He left you $1, Clara. Everything else goes to his daughter." Clara's hands shook as she read the will. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up. Desperation etched into every line. "This isn't fair," she cried. "I have nothing, nowhere to go." I stood up, my heart pounding. "Clara," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "You were so generous in offering me 3 months to move out of my childhood home. I think it's only fair I return the favor. You have 3 months to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. Maybe your neighbor will take you in." Her sobs turned into wailing. She dropped to her knees, clutching the will like it was her lifeline. "Please," she begged. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You can't do this to me." I felt a pang of guilt. For all her cruelty, she was now utterly defeated, and part of me pitied her. But I couldn't forget the years of manipulation, the pain she caused my father, and her betrayal. "Actions have consequences," I said firmly. "You made your choices, Clara. Sorry." Since the wake, Clara has been on a crusade to paint me as the villain. She's reached out to family members, friends, and even acquaintances, crying about how I'm kicking out a grieving widow. Some people have tried to guilt me into letting her stay longer, but most have been supportive, especially after hearing the full story. Clara still has 2 months left to move out, and I've made it clear there will be no extensions. I've decided to rent out the house and use the income to support causes my father cared deeply about. It feels like the right way to honor his memory, while ensuring that Clara doesn't benefit from his hard work. While I know I'm within my rights, part of me wonders if I was too harsh. Clara truly has nowhere to go, and suggesting she move in with the neighbor was probably unnecessary. Still, I can't ignore the years of cruelty and betrayal. I tried to extend her the same grace she showed me, but even that feels too generous sometimes. Reddit: am I the a-hole for giving Clara the same 3-month grace period she planned to give me? Clara's behavior throughout their relationship speaks volumes about her character. She didn't just fail as a stepmother. She actively worked to alienate OP from her father and erase OP's mother's memory. The fact that she announced OP's eviction at OP's father's wake, without even waiting for the dust to settle, shows just how entitled and self-centered she is. The 3-month grace period OP gave her was more generous than she deserved. Let's be real, if the roles were reversed, would she have shown OP the same courtesy? Doubtful. She had no problem trying to throw OP out, so she shouldn't be shocked when the tables turn. And as for having nowhere to go, maybe her lover can step up and take responsibility for her now. Actions have consequences, and Clara is finally learning that. OP is doing the right thing by honoring her father's wishes. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Wow, Clara really thought she had everything sewn up, didn't she? To stand up at a wake, in front of people grieving your father, and make a power move like that is jaw-dropping. She assumed she'd steamroll over you, and she had no idea what was coming. Honestly, your father's decision to change his will was not just justified, it was necessary. It's hard not to feel a bit of pity for her, but remember this, she brought this on herself. She cheated, manipulated, and mistreated both you and your father. Her crocodile tears now are just a last-ditch effort to play the victim. You didn't do anything cruel. You simply enforced your father's wishes and gave her the same timeline she was so eager to impose on you. Clara gambled everything, and she lost. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Your father saw through Clara's act at the end, and his decision to leave her $1 speaks volumes about what he thought of her. You're not the villain here. You're the person your father trusted to carry out his final wishes. The fact that she's trying to guilt trip you after years of mistreating you is rich. Honestly, 3 months is more than fair. She should consider herself lucky you didn't give her less time, especially after the way she treated you and the audacity of her announcement at the wake. Your plan to rent out the house and support causes your father cared about is a beautiful way to honor his memory. Don't let anyone guilt you into second-guessing your decision. Clara made her choices, and now she has to live with them. Clara's entitlement is staggering. She erased your mother's memory, treated you like an inconvenience, and thought she could waltz into your father's life and take everything he worked for. And then to stand up at his wake and announce her generosity, as if she were some benevolent queen. Unbelievable. Your father's decision to leave everything to you wasn't just a practical one. It was a declaration of trust. He saw Clara's true colors, and he wanted to protect you from her. By standing your ground, you're not being cruel. You're honoring the man who loved you and wanted the best for you. If Clara's really in such a dire situation, maybe her neighbor can step in and help. But you've already done more than enough. Not the a-hole. My aunt is, to put it politely, a complete piece of work. The more accurate description probably violates the terms of service. She isn't overly well liked in my family. However, my grandparents, especially my grandmother, believe that they can't exclude her from family events, based purely on their personal feelings for her. My aunt is an extremely shallow and materialistic individual. She has tried to get my grandpa to sell property that's been in the family for 100 years, so the money could be split between my uncles and my dad. This story, however, involves a very old pocket watch. I don't know the details, but the watch is Swiss and very old. It is gold with platinum inlay and is extremely valuable. Now, this watch has been passed down from father to son for a long time. It is going to be passed to my dad and eventually to me. My aunt hates this. She has tried to convince my grandpa to give it to my uncle, second oldest, and for my dad to just say my uncle should have it. Neither have agreed to that. It all came to a head on Saturday. We were at my grandparents' house for a birthday celebration. Everything is going well. People are having pleasant conversations. My daughter, who is 5, this is relevant, and younger cousins are having fun playing and somehow not causing more noise than should be humanly possible. It's been a wonderful day until my aunt goes to leave. She is saying her goodbyes. Everything is good. And then my daughter pipes up and says, "Don't forget to put back the watch, Auntie S." I look at my daughter and ask what watch, and she says the fancy gold one. My grandpa walks to his study and comes back out asking if she'd taken the watch. My uncle looks at my aunt and says she didn't. To cut a long story short, she is made to hand over her handbag, and lo and behold, the watch is inside. Everyone is furious. My uncle can't believe what she's done, and my grandpa wants her out of the house. This would all be bad enough, but to make this even better, she calls me that night and tries to scold me for raising a daughter who was a snoop. She'd seen my aunt while running around and playing, and that I needed to do a better job as a parent. I just laughed and said she's hardly one to talk, and hung up on her. I'm not surprised she tried to steal the item, but even I'm surprised she tried to make it my fault. She's been shunned by the family. Your aunt should be shunned by the family. To use an old phrase, the nerve of that woman. Their personal feelings for her are exactly why they can and should exclude her from family events. This incident proves it, and that watch needs to be placed in a safe deposit box. This happened a few months ago, but the issue is not resolved, and I need advice on what to do about this now. We have 2 kids, 4 and 3 years old, and have been together for 8 years. We both work, and our lives have been the typical stress of working full-time jobs while managing 2 little ones. My husband is good about doing his share of chores and is a great father to our kids, but has been complaining about how our lives have become dull and boring. For our 6th anniversary, I thought I'd surprise him with a vacation. I saved up slowly for the better part of the year to rent a mountainside vacation home for 4 nights. It was gorgeous and isolated and had amenities like jacuzzi and pool and outdoor showers and a lot of things that would help fulfill some of the fantasies my husband has. I spent a lot on expensive wine and drinks that we both would love. I made arrangements for sitters for my kids and then told him about the trip so he could plan time off from work and travel. We got there, and on the first night, just as we were getting into some hot my in-laws showed up. My mother-in-law came with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, and also my teenage sister-in-law. She said that since we had a big place with so many rooms, There was place for everyone. I was shocked and couldn't even say anything. My husband was shocked too, but he helped my mother-in-law pick a room and set up her stuff there. I was so upset, I took my glass of wine and spent an hour crying in the bathtub while my husband stayed with his family. I woke up early next morning to find that they had finished off most of the very pricey alcohol stash I had bought for the stay. I went on a long hike, and when I got back early afternoon, everybody was still asleep. My husband was up, and he apologized to me and suggested we have a quickie before we went down to make breakfast for everyone, which just made me angry. So he went down on his own to cook, and I packed up all my stuff and got in our car and left. I had left him behind with his stuff. He called me many times, but I ignored the phone till I finished the 3-hour drive to our home, and then texted him to let him know where I was. He was upset and wanted to come home right away, but mother-in-law wanted to enjoy the vacation, and since she was his ride, he was stuck there for another 2 nights, and finally came home on the day of our anniversary. I spent that day with my kids and friends and ignored him. My husband was furious with me for abandoning him, and we had multiple fights over this issue. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law sent me a text of apology, saying they didn't realize it was our anniversary, and mother-in-law led them to believe it was a spontaneous vacation for everyone. My husband also apologized for their coming over, but said that big a house was too much for us anyway, and we got more bang for our buck since more family members got to use the empty rooms. That hurt my feelings more, because it was my hard-earned money that I spent to make his fantasies true. When I said this, he argued back that all he wants to do is be able to duck his wife whenever, without me trying to make a big production out of everything. This argument just killed my attraction towards him. I feel like he likes to complain and wish for things, but doesn't actually want to make the effort to make them happen if it's in any way inconvenient. That he wants me to make his life easy, but doesn't prioritize my feelings. That may be unfair of me to think so, because he does so much for our family, but my view has become discolored by this event. He wants us both to apologize to each other and put this behind us, but I am unable to let it go. I do want to fix this, though, and I need help figuring out how to approach this. What do you have to apologize about? He should have spent that hour you spent crying in the bath kicking his family out of there. I don't understand how his family could show up to the exact house you'd gotten, unless he shared the address with them. Which, why would he do that if he wasn't trying to invite them along? So he had his family come to your anniversary and got angry at you for not going along with it? You have every right to feel how you feel. I wouldn't apologize either. Your man must have the wholesale price on audacity, because I've never seen such a pile of it in one place. He gave away a trip you planned for your marriage to his family. He ignored your feelings and refused to take responsibility. That would have been telling them to leave, or to even acknowledge that he was wrong. How many spouses would feel so lucky to have someone plan a romantic trip for them? Not yours, apparently. Do you want to give more of yourself to someone who doesn't appreciate what they already have? My live-in boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year. We both come from previous relationships and both have children. His children are legal adults, but both are still furthering their education and still live at home with their mother. I have paid all of our bills outside of some food costs for the past 7 months. His ex refuses to get a job, so he continues to support her and pay all the bills for her and their kids. I have no issue with taking care of your children. This is a must in my opinion. However, my personal bills are falling behind, and we have been at the threat of eviction multiple times. His children and soon-to-be ex-wife have no worries. All their bills are taken care of. They have their phones, TV, internet, electricity, food, and extra money to take out on shopping trips, while I struggle to pay bills and put food on the table for my children. He has promised multiple times to quit paying their bills and make his ex get a job. However, he continues to support them regardless. I asked him to move his children in with us. However, he says they will not live with him. Also, the fact remains that his children refuse to meet me or my children. Am I wrong in feeling upset that he lives with me and my kids, and has for many months, but his full paychecks outside of some of the groceries for our home goes to take care of his family while we struggle? I feel as if we live together, but he still chooses them. He sees that they are taken care of, while we get eviction notices and electricity termination notices because I do not earn enough money to cover all of our bills, and all of his money is going to them. I don't want to let pride or hurt cloud my judgment, so I'm looking for outsider opinions. I feel like you are putting this man before your kids and yourself. Why is his ex getting to live a carefree life while you and your family struggle? I'd kick him out. He can go live with her, and that's one less mouth you have to provide for. Do what is best for your kids. Wait, he's still married? This guy is playing you. He's biding his time with you until he can get back into his wife's good graces. If he isn't divorced yet, he doesn't want a divorce, and he's most likely hoping to financially tap you out so he gets evicted and can whine to her to take him back. He doesn't seem to care at all that you'll be homeless with your children. This guy is scum. Kick him out. I, 21 female, have been dating, let's call him M, for 2 years now. We recently just got into the conversation of what our future would look like and stubbed into the topic of parenthood. We both want children in the future, definitely not right now. We live together and we love each other very much. However, I think it is important that I state that I am a black female with a brown skin tone. My boyfriend is white. Anyways, during our conversation, I jokingly asked him what he wanted our kids to look like and their names. And he said he wanted our kids to be, and this is exactly what he said, light skin, with my blue eyes and curly hair. At first, I was taken a bit aback, but I brushed it off and said that there was a possibility the baby might come out looking exactly like me, or having brown eyes or brown skin, and he said that wasn't what he had imagined at all. He said he wanted the baby to be light skin or white. And to be honest, I was shook. I grew up struggling with my skin tone, and it took me years to learn to love myself. I don't want our kids to be born with a darker skin tone and for their father to not love them or to not even take them as his kids. Am I being too dramatic? I feel like I'm overcomplicating it, but at the same time, it felt like a stab in the heart, because I was hoping he'd accept our kids regardless of their skin tone, eye color, or even hair texture. I'm still going, so I'd really like some advice. Update. I calmed down and decided to go ahead and just sit down and talk to him about it with an open mind. This was the man I wanted to marry, and I didn't want to lose him. We sat down and discussed the conversation that had occurred many weeks ago. I told him that it hurt my feelings and explained to him how I took it. I told him that it almost sounded like he didn't want the baby to have any type of signification that they were black except their curls. I also explained genetics and how we couldn't know what the baby looks like. He quickly said that he wanted the baby to be white or light skin. He said that light skin was still technically black, so he didn't understand why I was so worried. I told him that there was no possible way the child would be white because its mother would be fully black. He then stated that he had said that he wanted light-skinned children with blue eyes and soft curls because they were more beautiful to him. I asked him and even showed him pictures of how different biracial children could look, from completely looking like one race or the other, or looking like a fair mix of the two. I also brought up how we had taken care of my nieces and nephews a couple times, both fully black and dark skin, and how he loved them, or at least I thought he did because of how sweet and kind he was towards them. He then proceeded to say that he accepted them because they weren't his own kids. He said he had different expectations when it came to his own kids. M said that he would find it easier to accept his kids if they were lighter skinned, because in his eyes, that's what he was used to and won't change his mind. I asked him if our baby came out brown skin, dark skin, tan, would he accept it? He said he would struggle, but would eventually have to accept the colored kids for me. And he said that in his own words. He said that the darker the kids are, the more troublesome they would become. M even brought up statistics of how more black youths with darker skin tones are in gangs, and many more like that. He said that if the children turned out lighter skin, it would be a shield from all the behavior that seemed to inhabit in dark-skinned people. This broke my heart. My infant little sister is dark-skinned, and this just really broke my heart on what he thought of her, and people of my skin tone. From our long conversation, I have learned that he would struggle to accept our kids if they looked more black than white, because that wasn't what he wanted, at all. He also said that it wasn't as horrible as it sounded, and that because he loved me so much, he would be willing to accept the darker-skinned kids. I have known him for a while, and he is a very bad liar and actor, so I could tell that it was all just a bunch of crap. I asked him why he had even began to date me if he thought that dark-skinned or brown-skinned people were so troublesome. He said that I was educated and didn't act black in any way, which really surprised me because I have always been vocal about where I came from and how I lived because of the many years of being silenced out of fear of rejection. He also said that if he had kids with me, they wouldn't act black because I would be the mother, which felt more like an insult than a compliment. It made me feel like I wasn't black enough, to the point where a white man told me that I was acceptable enough to be with him and birth his children because I didn't act black. I told him that I was shocked and didn't want to continue. So I grabbed a few things and was planning to drive back to my mother's house for a couple days. But he started getting all fidgety and saying that he would love the kids as long as I didn't leave him. He was crying and all that type of stuff, on his knees begging. I still left, but I just really struggled because this was a man who I trusted with my deepest insecurities. I trusted him with my soul and life. I didn't realize he had such views about people with much darker skin, to the point of them being more likely to be criminals. I am currently at my mother's house and he has been blowing up my phone, apologizing nonstop, and even came to the house. I plan to never go back to the man or see him at all. I've had his friends' text me some pretty harsh words, saying that I am unfair, and have even had some call me racial slurs. These are people I have invited into my home, have gone out with them to eat, and even let them meet my niece and nephew. I am repulsed. Honestly, you are my hero of the day. You asked a question that led to an answer you never imagined to be that important. You opened up the conversation to assess what it is you are dealing with, and you found out this is not the man you want to have a future with. You are brave, and I know it hurts, but in time, I hope you heal and get out stronger.